What up guys, Gozen here for AnimeUproar, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite characters in all of anime, Ban from the 7 Deadly Sins. Make sure to smash that like button for more 7 Deadly Sins. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any new videos. As always, leave suggestions for other videos you would like to see in the comments. For even more 7 Deadly Sins content, conversations, and crucial updates, follow us on Instagram at AnimeUproar. Keep in mind there will be manga spoilers in this video. So, if you're familiar with this channel, you know that the Life of series is where I take some of my favorite characters in anime, like Escanor, the Wizard King, and now Ban, and talk about their inspiring lives. The goal is to not only provide you with information about the character's life, but to inspire. The idea is that we can derive motivation and guidance from these epic characters and their inspirational stories. So let's turn to Ban, who wasn't always the inspiring man he is today. Ban started from the bottom, even lower than Drake. As a kid, Ban lived with an abusive father and what appears to be an indifferent mother who was prone to drinking. His father beat him frequently and forced him to not only steal food for himself, but for his parents too. His parents never helped him, he had to fend for himself and them while putting up with abuse. If he tried to sleep, his father would kick him in the stomach. So even when he was tired, he had a fear of falling asleep. When he'd get caught stealing, he would get beaten to a pulp by other grown men. This was difficult on a physical level, but it must have been just as difficult on an emotional level. Eventually, he was thrown into a prison. In prison, a man offered him some food. Ban was so hungry he gobbled it down. This man was named Zhivago. He told Ban that he was gonna escape from prison and invited Ban to come with him. But initially, you can see that Ban is not very trusting. Probably because he's been treated so poorly by other people that he finds it hard to believe that anyone would help him. Immediately, Zhivago noticed that because of his circumstances, Ban was forced to grow up fast. When he looked at Ban, he noticed that his eyes weren't the eyes of a youngster. Nevertheless, Zhivago continued to treat Ban with kindness, and eventually Ban did let his guard down and begin to trust Zhivago. He broke out of jail with him, and in one scene while Kid Ban is eating, he even tells Zhivago to eat too. He was starting to care for Zhivago as well, one of the first people to show him kindness. Someone who would actually give him food rather than beat him up for trying to take it. When he gets home though, he is beaten up by his dad for eating by himself instead of bringing his parents food. His dad beats him up until Kid Ban pukes, and then they insult him and kick him out of the house for eating his own puke. Another lady pretends to be nice to Ban, but only does so that she can kidnap him. She wants money from an aristocrat who supposedly wants to torture and kill kids like Ban. Again, Zhivago is the one who comes to the rescue, accidentally this time. As he's conducting his highway robbery business, he ties up the people who tried to kidnap Ban, and is surprised when Ban pops out of one of the barrels. Zhivago takes Ban with him and gives him food again. Ban gets sleepy and is trying to stay awake because his dad kicks him when he sleeps, but Zhivago says he'll watch over him so he doesn't need to worry. Zhivago decides to help teach Ban how to steal and tells him a story about the Fountain of Youth in the Fairy King's forest, which is kind of like the holy grail for thieves because so many people are after it. After Zhivago reveals to Ban that he has a son, Ban gets a bit awkward and jealous. But Zhivago says he also has a kid who looks and sounds rough and is standoffish named Ban. Ban blushes, he's touched. He probably never had someone say something so nice to him in his entire life. Zhivago goes on to tell Ban not to trust anyone, but Ban says he trusts Zhivago. Zhivago hugs Ban, probably one of the few or only hugs he got in his life up to this point, and tells him to get some sleep because they have thieving early in the morning. Ban is in a great mood the next day and smiling because he finally has a parent figure who cares about him. Zhivago is late, so Ban thinks he'll start stealing the treasure they were gonna steal together on his own so he can surprise Zhivago and get praised by him. However, he's caught. By the time Zhivago, who overslept, gets to the scene, Ban is being beaten up, worse than usual. Zhivago also hears that people are hunting for a werefox boy, who is actually his son. Zhivago has to make the decision of who to save, and he decides to try and save his actual biological son rather than Ban. He uses his own werebeast form to try and make it in time to save his son, but he's crying the whole time. He hates himself for letting down Ban, despite the fact that Ban trusted him. In the end, he was too late to save his real son, and he feared that Ban was beaten to death. Ban actually survives, but he's lost the most important thing in his life. Just as Ban began to feel like he had a true father who cared about him, Zhivago disappeared from his life. About 10 years later, inspired by Zhivago's story about a treasure guarded by a saint, Bon, now referred to as Bon the Bandit, sets out to steal the Fountain of Youth. He wants eternal life because he thinks if he lived long enough, chances are something good would happen to him eventually. He meets the Saint of the Forest, who immediately proceeds to seemingly send him flying to his death. But the forest saves Bon. After the Saint Elaine tells Bon that the forest would die if he took the Fountain of Youth, he decides to give up on stealing it. Elaine reads his mind to see if he's telling the truth, and he is, to her surprise. Elaine and Bon develop a relationship. They can bond over the fact that nothing good seems to happen to them in their lives. Bon's upbringing was tough, while the only person that cared about him, Zhivago, disappeared without a trace soon after they met, while Elaine has been bored and lonely for the last 700 years since she has had to watch over the forest and the Fountain of Youth in place of her absent brother, the Fairy King Harlequin. Bon reads to her from his book about different drinks he likes, and he tells her stories Elaine loves to hear. She gets sad when she thinks about the fact that they are already halfway through the book. She wishes that Bon came to steal her and not the Fountain of Youth. Bon overhears her and says, "Then how about I do that?" Bon says he doesn't get along all that well with other folks, and Elaine actually took the time to listen to him. Bon promises to find Elaine's Fairy King brother and bring him back, so that Elaine can be free. Elaine hugs Bon. It's clear they both love each other. These two extremely lonely people have found each other, and as a result, they're no longer lonely. Things seem like they're finally turning around for Bon, but next thing you know, a red demon attacks. Bon steals its heart, but demons have multiple hearts. All he did was draw the demon's attention to him and Elaine. The demon turns around and gives both Elaine and Bon mortal wounds. At this point, Elaine tries to save Bon. She begs him to take what he came for, the Fountain of Youth. She wants him to live on. However, Bon refuses and insists that she drink it and survive. Elaine appears to drink it, but then kisses Bon, and through the kiss, passes the drink to his mouth. Because of Elaine, Bon has become an immortal. He got what he came for, but at this moment, it's the last thing he wanted. He uses his new powers to defeat the red demon. As Elaine is dying in his arms, she tells Bon to plant the last seed of the forest somewhere so it can grow again. She tells Bon she was so happy when he suggested he'd steal her away. She wants to hear him say it one more time, but she passes away before he can even finish. Later, Bon gets arrested because everyone believes that to satisfy his own greed, he destroyed the Fairy King's forest and took the Fountain of Youth for himself. They also believe that he murdered the saint who protected it, meaning Elaine. When they are about to execute him, Bon doesn't bother to defend himself. He just points out that they got his name wrong. He is no longer Bon the Bandit. He is now Bon the Undead. So Bon ended up getting exactly what he came to the fairy forest for, but ironically, he feels worse than ever. He lost Zhivago, but he was hopeful when he got to the Fairy King's forest. Then he met Elaine, the love of his life, and just as they were opening up about their true feelings, she was snatched from him as well. Of course, Bon doesn't care if they capture him, torture him, or try to kill him at this point. Yes, he's immortal, but there's more to it. Not only has his upbringing been tough, the only 2 times he got close to people, they disappeared from his life. No physical pain could match the emotional pain he's been through. If anything, the physical pain might take some of the focus off the emotional pain he constantly carries with him. This is why he willingly allows himself to be captured, even if he could escape at any time. Fast forward 4 years, this is still 16 years before the actual events of the main story start, and Bon's still in jail and has been executed a total number of 33 times, except because of his immortality, they were all failed executions. He survived beheading, burning, and anything else the jailers could think of. Meliodas comes to see Bon in jail to meet this immortal man for himself. Bon thinks it's another executioner. He doesn't feel like moving, so he asks Meliodas to execute him in the prison. Then he notices that the person who entered is a kid, or at least looks like one. Meliodas says that he's come to free him. Bon says he's got nobody to see, no family to come home to. He tells Meliodas to scram because he's not trying to escape from jail. There's nothing for him on the outside. Then Meliodas says he'll just have to kick him out of the prison. Bon looks amused by the thought of a kid being able to kick him out, but the demon Meliodas has no trouble doing it. Bon is excited. He enjoyed the fight and wants to do it again. Meliodas says it's 1-0, and that if Bon wants more, then he has to come with Meliodas. And that is how one of the greatest bromances in anime began, with Meliodas beating up a depressed Bon and managing to get him to smile and laugh in the process. So far, Bon has had a father figure and a lover, but he hasn't had a real friend. Meliodas filled that role. Bon joined the 7 Deadly Sins and became the captain's best friend. Given how few people cared about Bon in his life, you can imagine how much Meliodas' friendship meant to him. At some point after this, Bon got drunk and pulled a prank. He stole all of the stuffed animals in the kingdom. Fairy King Harlequin was mad. King points out that each and every one of the stuffed animals is filled with memories and love of the children who own them. He calls Bon a terrible monster. In response, Bon opens a stuffed animal up and says they're actually filled with stuffing and old rags. King calls Bon a monster for his actions, while Hawk calls him a real horror. But Bon's actions make more sense when you know his background. He never had a childhood. He got punches and kicks to the gut instead of stuffed animals. As a result, he doesn't know how meaningful these old rags, as he calls them, can be to kids. After this incident, King continues to follow Bon around so he can clean up the mess he makes. Meliodas says they actually made a pretty good pair. Some years later, 10 years before the main story takes place, Bon and the rest of the Sins are framed for killing the great holy knight Zaratras. Meliodas orders the Sins, including Bon, to disperse and reconvene at a later time. However, time passed by without Meliodas meeting up with Bon. Bon began to believe that Meliodas was dead. Like when Elaine died, he let himself be captured willingly 5 years after the framing. According to him, he let himself be captured because he craved pain. He wanted the kind of suffering that would make him feel truly alive. Again, he needed to take his mind off of his emotional suffering. But when he learns that Meliodas' best friend is actually alive, he breaks the door down immediately and frees himself. Bon and Meliodas are ecstatic when they meet again and immediately begin to fight, both claiming that they have 361 wins out of 720. After the match, Bon tells Meliodas that he's happy to see him. Bon joins the Sins on their adventures. While the gang is searching for King, Bon gets stabbed by a kid who thinks Bon wants to steal his sister, when Bon was actually helping her. After realizing his mistake, the kid asks how he can atone for his sins. However, Bon's wound heals, as if nothing happened. He says, "True sins can't be atoned for." I believe that this is a very important quote of Bon's that shows the way he views the world at this point. He blames himself for Elaine's death, and he believes there's no way for him to atone for it. King shows up and stabs Bon with his spear as a greeting. At this point, King thinks that Bon killed Elaine, King's sister, for the Fountain of Youth. King calls it a grave, grave sin. Both want to go to the capital of the dead, where dead souls reside, to see Elaine again. In the capital of the dead, King reveals to Bon that Elaine was his sister and that he wants revenge. He uses his spirit spear, hoping to turn Bon into a stone statue for eternity. He asks Bon if he has any last words, but Bon just grins. He doesn't defend himself and explain what actually happened because he blames himself too. He blames himself for not being able to protect Elaine. In fact, if he didn't draw the Red Demon's attention to them all those years ago, she might have still been alive. So Bon willingly accepts King's punishment and gladly turns to stone. However, Elaine shows up, kisses Bon, and breaks the curse in the process. Bon can see her, but King can't. Elaine explains that the living have to have a strong bond between them for the deceased to be seen. This is why Bon can see her, because their bond is so strong, while she is still upset with Harlequin for abandoning the King's forest. Then Bon lets Elaine know that he came to tell her something. He finishes saying what he wanted to say about 20 years ago, but couldn't because Elaine passed away before he was finished. He tells her that, as she wished for so long ago, he will steal her away and make her his. Elaine blushes, sheds a tear of joy, and thanks Bon. Elaine later tells Harlequin that after he left, she spent her life, 700 years of it, in complete and utter isolation. However, Bon buried all that loneliness in just 7 days. She explains to King that Bon provoked King into attacking him because he was her brother, and that he is not the kind of man King thinks he is. The last thing Elaine asks is for King to help out and protect Bon no matter what. After they defeat Gilla, Elaine lets Bon know that she was happy to see him again. Bon says he'll see her around, and she kisses him goodbye. Later, after Berserk mode Meliodas fought Hellbrum, Bon and King are training together and get to talking. Bon reveals that he's helping the kingdom, but he's after the Trumpet of Cernunnos that's beneath the kingdom. He wants to use that to contact the goddesses and have them resurrect Elaine. King also brings up his doubts about Meliodas. After seeing him in Berserk mode, he wonders if he really is a demon. This makes Bon furious. He says he'll knock out all of King's teeth if he keeps talking about the captain like that. He thinks he could never be a demon. He could never be like that monster, referring to the red demon that killed Elaine 20 years ago. Of course, King is right. Bon is bothered precisely because it seems like his best friend could be a demon, and Bon hates demons because a demon took away the love of his life. Bon reveals how he feels about the captain. He says, "The captain told me to come with him. A guy like me who's lived his entire life like a shunned piece of garbage. In the whole wide world, the only whimsical oddballs like that are Elaine and the captain." Although he doesn't say it, Zhivago is in this category as well, but Bon doesn't know why he disappeared all those years ago. Nevertheless, this scene serves to emphasize the fact that Elaine and the captain are the two most important people in Bon's life. This makes what happens later all the more difficult for Bon. Bon eventually makes it to the trumpet. He asks the goddesses to take his life in place of Elaine's. However, the goddesses say that they are not interested in Bon's life. For them to bring back Elaine, Bon must kill Meliodas. Bon is shocked. In order to bring back Elaine, he has to kill the other most important person in his life, his best friend Meliodas. Before, one time when Bon got drunk, he told Meliodas that he would do anything for Elaine. It seems like he was being honest since he decides to kill his best friend to bring her back. This must be excruciating for Bon. He couldn't protect Elaine, and now in order to bring her back, he's attacking someone he loves. He even says he loves the captain as he snatches away his arm. This is even more meaningful because Bon has never used the word love like that before. Bon is going for the kill, and Meliodas understands. He says just as there are some things Bon can't relinquish, there are some things he can't relinquish either. While Bon is thinking about Elaine, Meliodas has to think about Elizabeth. During this fight, Bon admits that Meliodas is his best friend, but he asks what is he supposed to do? He came to the realization that he'll be alone forever, that he won't get to see Elaine again, whether on this plane or the next. And for Bon, a world without her is no better than hell. Finally, he has a chance to bring her back by killing Meliodas. However, Bon agrees to postpone the fight for after they've settled the matter at hand and rescued Elizabeth. Bon goes on to save Jericho, turning her back into a human. She has been obsessed with Bon ever since he undressed her during his escape from prison, and after this, she will only get more attached to him. During the battle against Hendrickson, Bon is brought to tears when Hawk takes a seemingly lethal attack in Meliodas' place. Bon is devastated that such a good guy like Hawk was killed. After the battle, Bon is very sad because of all of the mean things he said to Hawk, like that they weren't friends, just because Hawk was trying to reason with him and stop him from killing Meliodas. Then he says, "Everyone I've ever liked always leaves me." He is furious at the unfeeling Gother, who suggests that Hawk's death was a lucky stroke for them. Bon is so touched when Hawk finally turns out to be alive that he's brought to tears again. Afterwards, Bon doesn't try to kill Meliodas, but he decides that he has to leave the 7 deadly sins after having attempted to kill his best friend. Meliodas, ready to drop the whole thing, hopes Bon is joking, but Bon lets him know he's serious. One day, he turns to the house, says goodbye to the captain and Hawk, and then turns to go. Bon makes his way to the new fairy forest he planted. He has been routinely visiting the forest to feed it the fountain of youth in his blood, so it can keep growing. As a result, many fairies have come to view him as the king of the fairies in Harlequin's absence. Harlequin, believing that the forest burned down, decides to tag along to see what Bon is talking about, and Jericho, who's following Bon, ends up tagging along too. Despite King often referring to Bon as an evil or bad guy, Bon actually fulfilled Elaine's wish and saved the fairy forest, while the fairies have come to hate Harlequin because of his long absence. Bon reveals that Elaine's body still rests in the forest. He visits it and promises her lifeless body again that he will bring her back to life, whatever it takes. Clearly, Bon feels terrible about trying to kill his best friend. When the fairies claim that Harlequin is not fit to be king, Bon asks them if he tried to kill his only friend to bring one girl back to life, does he have what it takes to be king? Clearly, his conscience is still gnawing at Bon for attempting to kill Meliodas, yet another sin he's committed in his life that he thinks he can't atone for. He thinks he was to blame for his lover's death, and he tried to willingly kill his best friend. Later, Bon runs into a werefox, who of course turns out to be Zhivago, the only real father Bon ever had. This reunion and reveal is one of the most touching in the series and one of my favorite moments. Zhivago feels horrible for abandoning Bon to try and save his son that day, but Bon reveals that he never once bore any kind of grudge against Zhivago. He was the best father he could have asked for, and this brings Zhivago to tears. He's so happy that Bon's alive and that he's got to see how big he's grown. Zhivago helps Bon with his feelings about Meliodas. Zhivago tells him that no matter how much he regrets what he did, unless he lets Meliodas know, it won't amount to anything. He advises his son not to keep it all in, but to let it out and then beg for forgiveness. And with that, Zhivago passes away. Because Melascula is using her powers to resurrect dead souls, Elaine comes back to life temporarily. However, the magic that brought her back has corrupted her, amplifying her regrets and rage, so she gets unnaturally jealous and violent. She attacks Bon and Jericho, who says that she also loves Bon. It's clear that Bon cares about Jericho because he tries to keep Elaine from killing her. For Bon, Jericho is like a sister to him. In fact, she reminds him of a sister he had and looked out for when he was really young. However, his love for Elaine never falters. He says that he accepts the dark side of her, along with everything else. Melascula ends up showing up, but her commandment, which burns the eyes of those who lose their faith in the thing they believe in, has no effect on Bon. Bon has faith in Elaine, and that faith never faltered, even after she attacked him and Jericho. Melascula points out that despite everything Bon's been through, he has an innocent and beautiful soul. Nevertheless, she can kill him, because even though his body is immortal, she can still eat his soul. As she's about to eat it, Galan jumps in and seemingly eats Bon's soul. However, it was actually Zhivago's soul who sacrificed his own soul so Bon could escape. Despite the fact that it would mean he wouldn't be able to see his biological son, Zhivago wants to make it up to Bon for not coming to his rescue before. Zhivago tells Bon that he's also his precious son. He tells him to live for his lover and his friends. Thinking about Zhivago's final act, Bon can't help but cry. Bon ends up listening to Zhivago. During the Great Fight Festival arc, Bon and Meliodas see each other again and use their usual greeting. Again, Meliodas acts like nothing happened between them, like everything is the same as before. He even thinks it's great that Bon got to see Elaine again. Bon, following Zhivago's advice, tells Meliodas he's sorry. After this, their friendship is finally repaired, and Bon can be by Meliodas' side again without being overcome by guilt. In addition to making up with his best friend, Bon has noticed that there's a large gap between their strength now. In fact, Bon's been relatively weak for a while now. While Escanor could easily defeat Galand and Melascula, it was all Bon could do to run away from them. His powerlessness reaches a climax when he can't save his best friend from Estarossa. He tries his best, but he can't do anything to Estarossa as he destroys every one of Meliodas' hearts one by one. Bon's in tears. Just as with Elaine, he was powerless to help out his friend. All he did was watch both of them die, and Zhivago sacrifice his soul. Bon, using all of his power, couldn't even slow Estarossa down, while Estarossa destroys Bon's body effortlessly, without breaking a sweat. Of course, Bon's immortal body regenerates, but he's reached a new low in his life at this point. He was utterly powerless to save the people he cared about the most. Meliodas comes back to life because of his father's curse, but only to later lose his emotions, which are wandering around in Purgatory. Purgatory is described to us as a place where the air is a mix of both burning hot and freezing cold, while the earth is highly poisonous. Together, they destroy the flesh and bone of any living thing. Time is so distorted that a single minute lasts for a year. It eats away at the souls of mortals. If someone is going to go after Meliodas' emotions, they have to go through those insane conditions, while also being prepared to take on the Demon King himself, who is presented as a god in the world of the Seven Deadly Sins. Merlin's father spent only 1 minute in the outside world in Purgatory. He went in the strongest of wizards and came out a wreck of his former self. who couldn't stop raving about purgatory until his death. 1 minute in the real world, which is 1 year in purgatory, did this to him. So Merlin knows how harsh purgatory is, and she knows how powerful the Demon King is too, which is why she tells everyone to give up on saving Meliodas' emotions. Everyone is upset, either sweating or crying. They're not sure what to do. However, Bond steps up and calmly says he'll go. Despite Merlin warning him that he probably won't return and will only wind up dead, Bond is determined. Even if it means never seeing Elaine again, he says, "Please let me do this. I want to save my best friend. If I can't even do that, then how am I supposed to protect the girl I love?" Bond has finally given up on the idea of saving one or the other, as the sin of greed should be. Bond has become greedy in a sense. He wants to save both of them. He feels like his only option is to become strong enough so he can save both, because if he stays as weak as he is, he won't be able to save anyone. This is a vital step in Bond's journey towards atoning for his sins. Although he used to believe sins can't be atoned for, he jumps into purgatory to save Meliodas, risking his own life, sanity, and relationship with Elaine in the process. While before he tried to kill Meliodas for Elaine, now he is willing to risk never seeing Elaine again in order to save his best friend. Bond spends over 1,000 years in purgatory. He endured being burned to ashes, freezing to the bone, rotting from deadly poison, and more. Meliodas has temporarily lost his sanity in purgatory, but Bond helps bring him back to his senses. If not for Bond, Meliodas' emotions would have probably roamed in purgatory for eternity. Later on, Meliodas lets Bond know that he's incredible for enduring it all. Bond admits that he can't count the number of times he was ready to give up, but he didn't, and eventually his body's tolerance level rose and he got used to the conditions. However, Meliodas is more impressed that he could retain his sanity for all this time. Remember that Merlin's dad completely lost his sanity by spending 1 year in purgatory, let alone 1,000 years. Bond thinks that maybe he was able to endure it because he was raised in a total crap environment as a kid. Meliodas brushes this off as a joke, but it is significant that Bond would compare his childhood to purgatory. This really gives us a sense of how much pain Bond actually endured before he met Zhivago. Meliodas goes on to say that Bond's experience from enduring and adapting to purgatory has caused an explosive transformation upon his body and soul. Bond is pleased to hear that, and he hopes he's powered up enough to be able to fight against the 10 Commandments. Little does he know that he's powered up enough to be able to fight against the Demon King. Bond helps Meliodas get out of purgatory by using his snatch ability, which the Demon King has taught him to reverse. Because the Demon King used to drain his power, Bond learned how it feels to give energy rather than take it. This new ability comes in handy when he finally escapes purgatory. After his escape, Bond rescues Elaine from a number of demons with one swipe of his hand. Most of these demons are way stronger than the red demon who killed Elaine in the past, so it's a scene that really shows how far Bond has come. Then Bond uses his new ability Gift to bring Elaine back to life by sacrificing his immortality. In the past, Elaine wished that Bond came to steal her away rather than the Fountain of Youth, and Bond promised to do that someday. Well, that someday has finally come. And although Bond blamed himself for Elaine's death and viewed it as a sin that could not be atoned for, he never gave up and succeeded in restoring her life. Now the two lovers can be together for the rest of their lives. However, Bond still has to help Meliodas and the other sins. Although he could run away from danger with Elaine, he chooses to risk his now mortal life to help his best friend one more time. By the time Bond shows up to the battlefield, the Demon King has taken over Meliodas' body. He has easily overpowered everyone who has tried to attack him, and he was even about to kill Hawk, but Bond saves him, his other close friend. The man who was no match for Galland or Melascula is now going blow for blow with the Demon King, while Meliodas is fighting on the inside. With the help of everyone, but especially Bond, who throws the finishing punch, the Demon King is defeated, and Meliodas regains control of his body. Thus, Bond, the man who blamed himself for his lover's death and for trying to kill his best friend, who believed that sins could not be atoned for, manages to atone for his sins. He helped both of the people he had wronged, and the good definitely outweighed the bad in the end. He accidentally caused the red demon to turn around and kill Elaine, but he brought her back to life, not to mention all of the joy and love he brought into her previously lonely life. Then he tried to kill Meliodas so that he could bring back Elaine, but he didn't ultimately go through with it. He felt horrible for what he tried to do, and he felt like he'd never be able to make it up to him. However, Zhivago convinced him not to give up, and he did eventually find a way to make things right. Bon risked his life, his sanity, his relationship with Elaine in an attempt to rescue Meliodas' emotions from purgatory. Then he risked his life again after bringing Elaine back to life in order to rescue Meliodas' body from the Demon King. He paid his debts many times over. Bon experienced painful events after painful events. He went through a rotten and lonely childhood. He lost the love of his life. He was tortured in prison. He had to deal with the guilt of trying to kill his best friend. He lost his father Zhivago. He lost his best friend. He spent over 1,000 years in purgatory, and yet he never gave up. He kept moving forward. He made mistakes, but he worked hard to atone for his sins. And eventually, his perseverance and hard work was rewarded. If anyone ever had reasons to give up and quit, it was Bon. But he didn't, and he was rewarded for it. He managed to bring back Elaine and to save his best friend. He went from a lonely, starving, and powerless kid and ended up with the love of his life, the best of friends, and the power to help protect them. No matter what happens from this point on in the story, Bon has already had the perfect character arc. His story is inspiring and a constant reminder that even if things seem utterly hopeless and depressing right now, if you don't give up, if you keep faith, things are going to get better, perhaps unimaginably better. And that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. This was quite the long one, but it was totally worth it. Bon is one of my favorite characters in anime, and his story is one of the best. Let me know if anything in Bon's story inspired you or resonated with you. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more videos like this one. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button to let me know. For even more inspiring anime content, follow us on Instagram at AnimeUproar. A big thank you goes out to our patrons over on Patreon who help make these videos possible. I especially want to thank our pro tier patrons, the one and only Gilgamesh, Chubbs is the man, and Nothing But a Fan, and are the 1 tier patrons, the one who stand atop all clans, Baby Ray, A17 FFDP, Steven Ingrata, Alolan Atem, Maddie Mac 239, and Michael Calderon. If you enjoy our work and get value from it, you can support more of it by going over to patreon.com/AnimeUproar and becoming a patron today for as little as $1. If you do so, you'll get your name featured in future videos alongside these amazing people right here, and you'll even get access to our private patron-only Discord. So check out patreon.com/AnimeUproar, link in the description if you're interested. Anyways, thanks again for all of your support, and until next time, see you, Space Cowboys.